Okay.
All right. Lights, camera, action. I'm your host, Sully, at JURS Podcast, and here we are with a lovely filmmaking duo who goes way back. We're talking early 2000s.
That's right.
We got writer, director, and editor William Hopkins on the show. Welcome.
How you doing, Cam?
And we got award-winning lecturer and makeup artist and prosthetic specialist himself, Craig Lindberg.
Morning, evening. How you guys doing?
Absolutely. Both admirable talents.
Thank you.
Director Hopkins has recently remastered his work, and it is free to watch on the Roku and Plex channels, as well as Amazon Prime. Lindberg has been part of the award-winning team on Saturday Night Live, as well as second and third units for War of the Worlds and Inside Man, among other blockbuster movies and shows. But it all started back in 2002 with Sleepless Nights.
Craig was the only one to escape. If he was the only one to escape the stink of Sleepless Nights, have a career.
Well, no, I mean, I always look at it as everything's an experience, everything's a learning point. You know,
it came up on many.
You move on. I mean, you go.
It was
okay.
on many indie vampire movie lists.
I mean, that's why I look at it as. I mean, I guess if you're talking about it like that, I mean, I just think that. I mean, if you stay in one place, you stay in one place. That's your decision or not. There's always ways to make it happen. It just may not be as big as some people probably want it to be or expect it to be. But
you
there's small ways to do it. And yeah.
I mean, I've been on so many movie projects that just never got finished, and I had to just slap myself in the head. I was like, I could have seen it coming a long way, and yet I stayed with the train that was coming off the tracks. But you guys have at least, I got to applaud how inspired you were in your efforts,
Well, it was especially true back when we started shooting in 1999, when people were actually still mostly shooting movies on film.
Yes.
There are a lot of projects that just because of the additional expense that comes with doing post-production in film, they would shoot the whole movie and then it would never go anywhere because nobody could finish the film, And so we came along at a time when, in a way, we had an advantage because you could do a low-budget movie, and there were additional savings because you're shooting on digital video. And we had all of the things like Final Cut Pro, which actually came out the year that we started shooting the movie.
Yes.
So that was perfectly timed. The only problem is the equipment that we were using the VX1000, the Sony camera, which was a terrific camera for its time, but it was a consumer camcorder, basically. I know people talk about it as being a prosumer camera, but that
I used Sony camcorder a lot, even back in the 2010s, because
is that right?
Yeah, renting film equipment was just so ridiculous. Like, if it was just like any car rental, whoever brings it back and it's, they see one thing they don't like, you're in trouble. And I'm like, well, it wasn't me. It's not good enough. So I guess I'll bring my own equipment, because everyone's taking way too long worrying about the equipment when they just got to make sure the vision and the story and the actors are working.
Well, and unfortunately with a film like Sleepless Nights, it's kind of stuck in its time because it's standard definition video. No matter what you do to it, you can up-res it to high definition. And I spent the past couple of years trying every trick I knew to make it look better, but it's still basically a standard definition movie that's been blown up.
Why do you think MTI screwed up the color quality when they brought the DVD rights? Why do you think?
Well, they actually thought that they were improving it. I mean, back at that time, it's kind of hard to believe now, but back at that time, even small companies like that didn't want to release things that were shot on video. They wanted to shoot. They considered a matter of their primary customers were companies like Blockbuster. And Blockbuster didn't want a bunch of shot on video movies. So it was a big step for them. And the only reason they were willing to do it is because it was digital video, and there was a bit of a buzz about digital video around that time. And also they said, you got to send it along to this company that's going to process it and make it look like film. But the problem is what they were doing to it was basically just deinterlacing the picture.
The equivalent of taking a random YouTube video and then enhancing the color to where it's showing stuff that you shouldn't see even before they were doing Blu-ray remasters.
Yeah, it wasn't the ideal thing, and the we actually had to pay for that, believe it or not. The distributor insisted that we pay to have this company process. I won't mention their name because I don't want to make any enemies, but we had to ship it off to California, and they for $2,000 they processed it. And now, and even by the time I got to do Demon Resurrection, that was the sort of thing that we had all figured out ourselves. We knew how to de-interlace, video. And that was, it made the film look kind of ugly, even uglier than it did. And then, of course, they had the problem with the discs. They were putting out a lot of discs. And whoever was authoring it, when they were putting the director's commentary track on, they bumped the audio for the movie out of sync. So as you watch the movie, it's gradually going further and further out of sync until at the end of it, it looks, by that time, even porno movies, they always had the dialogue, whatever dialogue they may have had, they had it in sync. So it made us look pretty stupid that we couldn't even get, the picture looked ugly and the sound was out of sync. So it was not an auspicious debut. I don't know, Craig, did you ever get a good copy of the movie?
Well, I got a DVD. I think the initial DVD copy that I got, it didn't last very long before it started having some kind of, glitchy problems, or it would freeze. I actually watched the movie again last night, and I did pay for it. So, so,
you did what?
I paid for it. I got it was like $1.99 on Amazon, and so I paid for it. So there, I gave you a little bit of money back.
I appreciate that. Yes,
you're welcome.
How much of that I'm going to see, I don't know, but I appreciate it.
Well, Amazon goes, hey, we made some money, so maybe we'll give a little bit more. We'll get some more stuff from you.
It is beneficial, actually, because if they see that people are buying it or renting it, then it means they may recommend it to more people. So
yeah. Well, I guess money talks.
It does, yes. And on the free channels, interestingly, nowadays the free with ads channels, you have a greater chance of making money.
Because of the advertisements.
Yeah, because Tubi, for instance, which Sleepless isn't on yet, but my other film, Demon Resurrection, is on. They pay very well, and they're very popular.
They treat people with respect.
Yeah, they actually, amazingly, I don't know, it's a strange phenomenon that there's actually a company that's paying decently. But we probably made more with Demon Resurrection on Tubi than in the previous 10 years that film has been out. So
well, you're still making movies, aren't you?
Well, I'd like to.
Well, what I'm saying is we were talking about before, the first initial start, you're still making movies. You're still doing it.
Well, yes. And I hope to make more if...
yeah. Well,
unless there's some sort of law passed.
Right. Is it illegal to make more than 5 movies? Yeah. So just to backtrack a bit, we're Director Hopkins. You always have you always wanted to make movies, or was it just later on?
No, since I was a kid. Probably I'm similar to Craig in that I think Craig is. I know I've seen some of Craig's posts about model kits, monster model kits, and dinosaur model kits.
You see some of them in the corner back there.
Oh, yeah, there they are. I think I see Godzilla lurking on your...
Godzilla, Rodan, Ghidra, all the Universal monsters are back there.
So both of us probably are in that sort of generation of,
Universal
classic monster kids. Right? And
kids, yeah.
I remember seeing Dracula on TV and local creature features when I was like 4 or 5 years old. Seeing King Kong on Channel 9, which was like a Thanksgiving tradition for years.
Right. Son of Kong.
Right.
March of the Wooden Soldiers.
And March of the Wooden yes.
And Craig, you said you were inspired by Exorcist. You saw when you were like 10 or 11.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my mom, I probably seen more heads decapitated by the time I was 12 years old than most people do. And I often would wonder why because they were all G-rated, which was funny. As long as you didn't say the F word many times,
right,
or cut someone's head off. and that
or
was
5 seconds of booze, but only 5 seconds.
Yeah, like a little side boob, and you're okay with it. I mean, it was interesting how it's still kind of like this, to the fact that you could literally kill someone, but you can't have sex with them.
Right. As if it's any different. Yeah. It's
yeah.
Well, it's good for exploitation filmmakers though, because we have something that we can show that will actually bring in some bucks, something that the big studios up until fairly recently weren't showing that much of.
Right.
So it's good.
Why do you think the whole theory that R-rated movies don't make any money, even though movies like Blade, which I definitely got a vibe from Sleepless Night from, and Matrix and Terminator and Halloween were always going to sell out theaters? So it's just like, why do people think that R-rated movies don't make money, and they still don't post Deadpool making a joke about it,
Well, those movies made a lot of money for R-rated movies, but they probably didn't make much. Probably didn't make as much in comparison to Star Wars or Sound of Music or Disney cartoons and things like that. So,
easy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you're from a business standpoint, I would imagine the safest thing to do would be to make something that you can get a PG or PG-13 on. So it's not childish, it's not quite in that category of being a kiddie movie, but it still is something that Granny and the kids, and everybody and the dog can come and see. And,
it can't be Cronenberg or Verhoeven levels of X-rated violence. Yeah.
You're not going to take the crowd out, to see a Serbian film or whatever it is.
That would be amazing, though.
Human Centipede. Well, I think I saw one of the streaming platforms is showing that now. One of the free. I don't know if it's free or not. I guess it is free.
I think so. I cried profusely at that one.
I wonder how you work the ads into that one. That must be tricky. Right?
Yeah, how do you make a trailer that can actually tell a coherent tale? It'd probably just show a 5-second clip of the main character screaming, "This is what you want," and then cut to Serbian
That's probably
film
the most
coming to Blu-ray.
Yes.
Yeah.
But a lot of films like that, I mean,
kind of like High Tension. How do you show safe to cable TV air? There's not going to be USA Network or TNT edit of that one.
Right. Or even something like Human Centipede. It's hard to, I mean, on the one hand, you say, well, they made all their money, whatever money they did make, because it was such a shocking and outrageous thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they immediately had to forget about a whole other part of the marketplace, right? There's a whole section of the market that's lost to them because of the type of stuff they're doing. I guess it is in a way similar to porno films, right? Your market.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, you have the content and so many things. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say they never made a Sound of Music 2 or 3 as opposed to Human Centipede, where they've done 2 and 3.
Multiple segments.
Yeah, right. The chain just keeps getting longer and longer.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a marriage of those two worlds would be is scary to think about. Sound of Music and Human Centipede. That's
Sound of Human Centipede.
Sound of Human Centipede. There you go.
Pedes, yeah.
The brutal.
The hills are alive with the sound of centipedes.
Yeah. So I do have to actually compliment you on Sleepless Night. I do think it's a fun B action horror movie.
Oh, thank you.
We need more of those mashups. And there were other kind of movies like that coming around that same time. There was this one actually from 91, Night Owl. I don't know if that ever sparked sent in the video store mayhem. It was one of John Leguizamo's first movies, and it was an interesting kind of like The Addiction in this one. It's a very New York based movie, and mashing up slasher subtext with forbidden love, and at night you got this secret police force that hunts vampires. It was just cool to see how you're one of many who just kind of did your own routine. And Demon Resurrection was a delight to see as well, because you're getting vibes of everything from, obviously the most apparent is Night of the Living Dead, to Fulci's cinema. You're getting all this uneasiness and claustrophobia, and because you stuck to the one location rule, which is always great.
Well, that was the one mistake. Well, one of many mistakes we made with Sleepless Nights, and I think
you're too close to it, my dude. You're too close to it.
Was that?
You're too close to it, my dude.
Well, with Sleepless Nights, we had like 13 locations. So, we saw the problem with that. Craig, who I think you were probably there for almost every pretty much almost every day we shot, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And the shoot went on for 2 years, right? Occasionally, first it started like a month where we did in Long Island, and that was pretty much all in one place.
Right.
And then our lead actor left the production because he got a paying job, a real movie.
Something like Law and Order or something like that.
Yeah, well, he went on to become a very successful actor. He went on to become a successful actor under a different name. So we can't really benefit from that.
Yeah, the main vampire guy, he was so handsome and charismatic, and I just didn't see any other credits for his resume.
No, he doesn't have any other credits under Matthew Thomas. Gotcha. All of his other credits are on his other name. Gotcha. And he's actually right now on he's been in like 2 or 3 big streaming series in main roles, key roles. Bart Chateau, who plays Dr. Sloan, is a successful stage actor. He's done Broadway shows. As a matter of fact, a couple of years after Sleepless Nights came out, I went to see him. He was doing the Broadway musical version of Dracula, which didn't really work out. But he was playing Quincy Morris, one of the main characters in the show. And he was nice enough to include Sleepless Nights in his bio in the playbill, which I really appreciated.
That's always fun.
Most of the other actors refused to acknowledge that they were involved.
That's a shame. I hate that kind of snobbery. It's like no one goes out of their way to make a bad movie. It's like, I've been surrounded by stuff like that too. We were doing web series once upon a time, and we would have people say, "Hey, can you please take my credit off IMDb?" I'm like, I mean, you might as well just ask me to not release it if you're just this stubborn and don't want people to see it.
Well, I've had that happen fairly recently with Demon Resurrection, where one of the actresses who was involved, and she wasn't even the main, like a lead actress in it.
Yeah.
But she was contacting me, asking me to take it. Well, she was always a pain in the ass anyway, but she was contacting me, asking me if there was any way to take her name off, because the IMDb kept putting the trailer for Demon Resurrection at the top of her profile page. So it must have been very depressing. She's like almost 20 years of being stuck with Demon Resurrection like toilet paper on her shoe,
How do you filter out that snobbiness?
Well, I mean, in a sense, I can understand. Not everybody sets out in life to be like a poster child for low-budget horror movies, right? It's not the sort of thing that these actors are really aiming for.
Sure.
But a lot of people have started in low-budget horror movies and gone on to big things. Johnny Depp is a good example. Leonardo DiCaprio.
Well, wasn't George Clooney? Wasn't he in
George Clooney? Yes,
he was in Attack of the Killer Tomatoes Part 2.
Tomatoes, and he was Tarantino's favorite movie, Red Surf, which is a random drug dealer movie.
Brad Pitt was in a very
Eric at the Mall and other stuff.
Yeah. I mean, and then of course when they become big, they remember where they were, and suddenly they're top billing on these little low budget.
Angelina Jolie was in Cyborg 2
Who's the guy that plays?
I mean, Leprechaun. Come on, you know what I mean?
Leprechaun, yes.
Who's George Costanza? I always forget the actor's name.
Jason Alexander. Yeah,
he did a low budget.
The Burning from '81,
and I think Kevin Bacon was in one.
Kevin Bacon was in
Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th.
So pretty much everybody. Pretty much everybody who's anybody started in low budget.
Job is a job, right?
But you didn't see any of those guys say, "Hey, please take it off my resume."
Well, the secret though is they went on to other stuff.
Yeah,
and I think that's what sort of galls some of the actors, is that they haven't really done anything over the years that would give them a credit to push our movie out of the way. And so they're just stuck with that now. And because acting is a rough business. I mean, I don't envy anybody at all in that business. I've seen a lot of really talented people that didn't go anywhere.
True.
So it's just as difficult, if not more so, than filmmaking, because at least I can hide, they got their face right out there, and sometimes more than their face, as you saw in Demon Resurrection. Wow. So, people like that, they do a film like that and they give it their all. They go beyond the call of duty by bearing all. And then 20 years later, they're working as a school teacher, or, they're working in a Walmart. And I guess it probably is a little bit of a hindrance to them,
And to add to that point, I think that's what you guys saw Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, right?
I haven't seen it, but I'm aware of it.
Okay, yeah, the Eric Friedman guy. Yeah. Craig's over here looking at what kind of junk does Cam like?
Listen, I used to watch all that stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, the crazier, the better. The weirder, the better. Unfortunately, we used to have the old. Sorry to interrupt you, but when you used to have the old video stores, the mom and pop video stores, you go there and you got content, and they needed content, so they released everything under the sun.
They took it all.
Yeah, and I remember seeing a movie called Fat Guy Goes Nutsoid.
Oh yeah,
why not?
The guy that did the music for the first version of Sleepless Nights, the original version, that guy is in fact. Yes,
it's a small world.
Wow.
He's always telling me I was in the worst movie ever made. And I never believed him. And then I watched the movie and said, yeah, it's pretty much the worst movie ever made.
but here he is saying I was in that movie. He's not denying it. He's saying
not denying. He's honest.
That's right. It's a badge of honor for him.
Do you think everyone has a pixelated version of the world? Like when you say you're indie, people expect Sam Raimi. When you say you're big budget, people expect Christopher Nolan. How can one who's, again, an independent filmmaker just kind of let everyone know, hey, we gave it our all. You got to stop having this comparison and contrast to all these other people who were not even trying to be like, not a diss, but not a,
Well, getting people to look at the movie just for what it is, instead of coming to it with all sorts of expectations, that is a real challenge, because on the one hand, you have like the fan press, which is always mostly concerned about clicks nowadays, right? I mean, back when we did Sleepless Nights, it was a question of what sort of magazine is going to give any sort of real coverage to this.
Now it's Bloody Disgusting and Crave are still going to seek you out and
but
screeners.
They have to get the feeling that it's actually going to be worth their while to feature your movie. Even if they're giving it a bad review, it has to be worth their while. So you got that on the one hand. And of course, on the other hand, with the way the internet is set up, I don't know who to call to complain about this, but the way the internet is set up, everybody can say whatever they want, and you have no idea who's talking. It could be a 13-year-old kid. It could be somebody in their 60s, So you get all sorts of crazy things said about your movies, and it's always the thing that you least expect. I mean, you think you got all the angles figured out. You think, oh, I know what people are going to say. I know what they're going to criticize us for. And then you got somebody coming at you with some crazy shit, that you say, well, where did they come up with that? All the folks that come with preconceptions, like, I don't like this type of movie. I don't like movies where the vampires are romantic. I want scary vampires. Say, well, what can we do? This is what we.
I mean, you had plenty of reason to not watch it before you left this crappy review. I mean, so there's sometimes it will be the simplest thing where, hey, so and so has the weirdest hair. I'm like, well, that doesn't have anything really to do with the movie. Were you entertained? Did you finish it? Were you reminded of other good movies that it's trying to emulate? It's just interesting how you get all this BS.
I think things have gotten better since Sleepless Nights has come out, since it originally came out, because it seems to me that there's a lot of good film critics. We sort of grew up, all the people that were commenting on films and had film blogs, they've gotten better, or the ones that weren't so good have been sort of weeded out. You have a lot of very smart stuff being done now on YouTube, for instance, a lot of interesting essays and things about film. But at the time when it came out, there seemed to be, they were using films, since they knew most people were not going to see a movie like Sleepless Nights, they felt free to use it as sort of fodder for some sort of ongoing stand-up comedy routine they were doing. And this might be the negative effect of Mystery Science Theater and things like that.
Yeah.
The idea is just to use the movies as a way, to provide you with some sort of material so you can, do a comedy act. And that doesn't seem really fair to me. Although asking for things to be fair is a lost cause when it comes to dealing with, critics, whether they're self-appointed critics or the real professional critics. The funny thing is the real print critics, we actually got pretty good response from. It was the other folks.
No, I'm glad you say that because it's a real gray area. Like Elvira and Joe Bob don't want to put anyone down, even though they are being funny during the movie. And then, yeah, Mr. Science Theater. I mean, Frank Conniff himself said, "We're not a movie criticizing guy. Why are people using us for their movie criticism? We're just a comedy show, which is just as low budget as the movies we joke during." But yeah, it is.
Yeah. I have a feeling that with both of my films, if they had been worse, we probably would have been more successful. I would have been making more money now if the movies were worse, because at least people would say, "Oh, it's so bad, it's good," like Birdemic or something like that.
Yeah, The Room. Yeah,
right, or The Room. Yes.
And it's wild how you know that, because there's other people who don't know about those movies. They only know about just whatever crazy stuff they saw on Showtime and HBO back in the 80s and 90s. So It is interesting how every movie comes in a different form and a different wave, and it takes a while for anyone to hear back about this. But no, I honestly would see. I only knew about Sleepless Night because it was listed on like just indie vampire movies to seek out, just independent lists. So I think it has some fanfare. I'm just letting you know.
Well, hopefully now it will. Yeah, hopefully as
now that you've remastered it and second coming.
And we got the DVD coming out. We're going to be doing more promotion. So
good, I can replace my DVD.
Yes, I'm going to make sure that you get a new one.
Thank you.
But I did send you a screener, Greg. Didn't you ever get that?
Maybe.
You actually might have that still lurking in your email
somewhere.
Maybe
a link to a free screener.
Was Demon Resurrection released to a festival? It looked like it had a LA release somewhere.
It was. We got it into one festival, the Whitby Bram Stoker Film Festival in Whitby, which I don't think they're running anymore.
Oh, bummer.
And they programmed the screening of the movie the same night that they were having like some sort of major, party. So nobody saw it except for one critic who wrote a very nice review of it. So it was worth sending the damn thing to Whitby, England, just to get that one good review, I think. But the critic said, it's obviously inspired by Burial Ground. And I thought, Burial Ground? What the hell is that? I never heard of Burial Ground. So I went, have you ever heard of Burial Ground?
That sounds familiar.
That sounds familiar, yeah.
It's a 1981 zombie film by Andrea Bianchi. So.
It's like Spanish, German, or some sort of strange combination like that. Anyway, I went and I watched it, and sure enough, it is similar to Demon Resurrection. Probably because that we were both imitating Fulci's movies mostly.
Right.
Zombie, But we haven't had much. I've always felt that festivals are kind of a waste of time for movies like this. I don't expect. These are movies that were primarily made for the home video market. I don't expect any distributor who's going to say, "Here's $1 million. We saw your movie at a festival," and have a bidding war over Demon Resurrection. Just didn't seem likely. Besides the fact both films were shot in standard definition. So they're never going to have any sort of theatrical life. It just was, an impossibility.
And now with the internet, people are less averse to whether it got played in a theater or not,
Right. Yeah. Nowadays, it's almost pointless to worry about theatrical. I mean, in a sense, it's almost pointless to worry about DVDs. But it is kind of nice to have it on DVD. I didn't think that anybody was doing DVDs anymore, and the producer found some distributor that's still still supplying them to Walmart and some of the other big chains.
Still for the gas station crowd, even though I don't see as many gas stations or even Big Lots selling them, but they're there. It's an option.
Yeah, apparently they still are making. I mean, I guess they must price them very low, so I don't imagine it's going to be a tremendous source of revenue, but. It's nice to have a physical thing,
Totally.
So that's coming soon.
Even better.
Yeah.
So
and Demon Resurrection is out on DVD, but I would like to have a better DVD if possible, maybe at some point in the future.
I dig the Foley on it, especially. I think that was one thing it allowed for that period, for when people were testing out their Dolby Digital. You guys went to town with just getting that under the skin kind of feel.
Well, that's. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And Craig, sidebar question: when experimenting with the different formulas and everything, what's been your favorite materials to use for your makeup, or is that the equivalent of asking
depends on the job?
Yeah.
Well, it really depends on what the job is, because silicone's a very popular material now. It's more, because since it's a chemical process, you can make it very tough, you can make it very soft, you can make it very flexible. But it has weight. So, foam latex is still being used in a lot of places because it's very lightweight. You can have something very big and elaborate, but it's very lightweight. The problem is it's an opaque material, so you have to learn how to paint it so it looks like it's translucent. Silicone, for what it's worth, can look translucent easy by the way you paint it and the way it's intrinsically painted, but it has weight. So in terms of materials, it depends on what the job requires. There's a product it's called Bondo, but it's not really called Bondo. It's basically thick and prosthetic adhesive. And they've been using that a lot for doing a lot of small prosthetics and things like that. So it depends upon the job. And, do I need to make something so big and elaborate? Well, it depends. It really, really depends. And it depends on how much money they have to spend, too.
Correct, Amundo. This is what you get.
And then time. Time is also another factor, because foam latex, to what it is, still takes hours to go. And you don't know whether it's going to work or not until you pull it out. With silicone, you have like within 35, 40 minutes, whether or not the material is working or not. And you say, okay, good, it's going. So it really depends upon the budget and money and
the test run is complete. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I do a lot of stuff that literally I come home and I build it and I make it and it has to be ready for the next day. So I have to go with something that I know that's going to be quick and pretty much foolproof. But that really comes with playing around and playing with the materials and knowing what works and what doesn't work, for that particular job, a specific job.
For sure.
Has CGI diminished your
I'm sorry, what was that?
Has CGI diminished the job?
Not really. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes I don't mind it, because I did a movie where we had to slit someone's wrist, right?
Right. And show graphic knife insert.
Very graphic. And the director wanted the practical blood, but the problem was the amount of blood that came out of that poor person. And because it was, she cuts her wrist in the bathroom. Her brother comes and finds her and tries to staunch the blood. But the blood pulled up in the bathroom. Physically, the blood pulled up in the bathroom, and the bathroom's floor was a little like this. So all the blood pulled up to one side. So it was behind the toilet, on the vanity. So we had to clean all that blood up. It took an hour to clean up between each take, because that's how the director wanted. So when they started saying, well, do it in CGI, I'm like, you don't have to clean that shit up? Okay, I'm happy. So yes, in some ways, I'm very happy that it's around, because it does make things go a little smoother. I've never felt like I've been affected by it. Only positively, I feel like I've been affected by it. Because there's sometimes I'm like, you mean I don't have to do that? Okay, I'm good. Okay, I'm happy.
You're not the only ones. I've seen some second unit directors be threatened by it. I've seen stunt people be threatened by it. It's like, well, you can't even see me, so not going to make the shot. But like you say, you're still going to get, big paycheck, but at the same time, you kind of, it can be 50-50 depending on the editor or if a producer's involved and they got a different take than the creatives. So,
I mean, when you get someone gets shot in the head and they do this little squib to the back and it goes everywhere, someone has to stop shooting and they have to clean that up. So, boom, you got to sit there and you got to wait for everything to get cleaned up. If they do it that way, if it's CGI, it's done post. You can literally go through the entire shooting day and then don't worry, we'll save it in post. We'll do it. I mean, if I could do a little name drop, when I did a movie called War of the Worlds. It's one of my first features I ever worked on.
Was disturbed by that in theaters. I was like, whoa.
I liked it. I mean, a lot of people don't get the premise of the movie, but if you look at it from a father's point of view, that he was a father, you get the movie.
I think people have gotten it now that they can rewatch it. I mean, the fact that you can tell that the father and kids aren't on the same wavelength when their body language shifts and changes with every other thing they're saying. But like you say, I think everyone was distracted by real life media stuff, let alone they didn't know they were going to get a gritty movie. They just thought, oh, stupid, 50s B picture. I'm like, well, it's not trying to be like that. I mean, the train on fire, should already be a big indicator that this is suspenseful.
But
do you get any fanfare for that one, let alone for Rock and Roll Frankenstein?
If well, let me finish the point. Sorry, I was going to make, and then we get to that. No, it's fine. So what happened is there's a scene towards the end of the movie where they're going through a tunnel. We were shooting it in New Jersey, I believe, and there was a part, and they were editing the movie as they were shooting it. So all the footage would be sent to an editor. So we're going through the thing, and they're on a dolly, and Spielberg's on the dolly, looking at the dolly, and Dennis Muren was there, which was awesome. Yeah, visual effects legend. Yeah. So he goes to Dennis Muren, he goes, and there was a shadow of the camera crew on the wall. So now normally they would stop and they have to relight it, and they do it. And he just looks, Spielberg looks at Dennis Muren, he goes, "You can CGI that out." He goes, "Yeah, boom." And they kept shooting. So there's the benefit of CGI, where they didn't have to shoot or reshoot, they relight and stuff.
Learning as they go.
Well, I'm not learning, but figuring it out. Like, yeah, that can be done that way, right? Yes, I know how to do. Like, if you know your tools, so before about the prosthetics, you know your tools. Well, yeah, we'll save it in post. And what was the question?
One of the things that I would say, though, is maybe things have become too easy for the filmmakers.
Right.
Everything is done with the notion that it can be fixed in post or can be created entirely in post. And now we're at a point where I don't know what we're up to, shooting in 4K, 8K, 10K, whatever the enormous
60
size.
frames per second. Yeah.
All right. And so they don't even have to frame the shots anymore. They can get general footage and then do everything, do close-ups and medium shots and everything, camera movement in post. We also see things like the screens, the LED screens that they're using now, rather than doing
I just saw that
and matting work.
Yeah, I just saw that. I was never seen it before, and I was on a movie in I just came back maybe last week from a movie shooting in Massachusetts, and they were all wraparound digital screens, and I've never seen that before. And I was like, oh my God, we don't have to go outside and freeze our asses off anymore. They can just.
But there's something lost.
It took us 40 years.
I can understand if they're doing
beautiful.
If they're doing a movie
really
that's supposed to take place on another planet, like Star Wars, a TV show, The Mandalorian, or whatnot. But there's something to be said for actually being in the real place, right? It affects the way people behave. It affects the choice of the shots. Yes, and one of the things you hear from the people that are using these screens now, I think Hollywood Reporter did a story about it recently, where they said there's so many of these screens and so few people who actually know how to use them. And one of the directors that they spoke to said, "Gee, I really wish we were out shooting this in a real place."
Yeah,
because it becomes too sterile. It becomes too much of a. I mean, most feature films, especially the big budget ones, feel like computer generated stuff now. And I think a lot of movies like Guillermo del Toro has done a couple of wonderful movies, but I think they would have been a lot better if they hadn't spent so much time being processed in the computer. Everything looks computery,
Well, it's a computer's interpretation of what's real. And it's a series of numbers as opposed to,
it distances people from the story. It distances people, the audience, from the emotion of the thing. I mean, there's been some films recently, some horror films. What was the one that came out recently that was done by that James Wan guy?
What was that?
You know the one I'm talking about?
Is that the one with the girl had the thing in her back?
Yes.
And Parasite. What was
some of the people?
Malignant.
Yes, thank you.
Some of the people that were reviewing it were giving it good reviews because they thought that it was a parody of horror movies. It was so over the top and so ridiculous. And a lot of that comes from the fact that it was probably largely done in the computer. Most of the footage that I saw of it looked like stuff that you might have, years ago, you would have expected to see in a video game. I can't see how
fighting and stuff like this.
Yeah, I mean, even the idea of having this enormous set, a number of people commented on that must be like a joke, like the director's making a joke about how in these movies the sets are always so huge, the houses that the action is taking place in is always so huge. But whatever the reasoning is, it just looks fake to me. It doesn't have the immediacy, and particularly in a horror movie, you want to believe that you're really there. You don't want to be watching something that seems like it's been carefully crafted and extruded from a computer. You want to feel like almost like a documentary quality. But
yeah.
I realize
like
that
they
I'm
don't allow
probably not in
anyone-
the majority on that. There's probably most people are very happy with the stuff they see.
I depend on the movie. I think they just don't allow everyone enough time, much like Craig was hinting at makeup. Sometimes the budget or time is just not there. And then at the same time, you do wonder, where did all the millions of dollars go to besides the big names that are attaching? So, yeah.
True.
Well,
That's very true.
I mean, the Marvel Comics type movies seem to have set a standard now where
Shoot
it
cheaper
doesn't
in
matter
Atlanta and do little advertising, hype it up at a convention, make millions.
Right, and they're rushing the movies out apparently even before the special effects are properly finished.
Yeah.
I mean, rather remarkable thing to hear Taiki Waititi, is that how you pronounce his name?
Mm-hmm. I think so.
Making fun of his own movie because of the special effects didn't look like they were finished. And that's a new development in the world of cinema, right? The director commenting on his own movie saying, that doesn't look too good there.
Yeah. What's your take on how sometimes, you get a lot of these, they're seeking indie guys who are at A24 movies or Sundance, and people are going to get a totally different movie because they went from an indie movie to now filming on a giant, mainstream big budget production. Do you think some people are ready for it and other people aren't? And other times you're just kind of just still a different kind of hired gun?
Well, maybe a guy like him feels like he can still retain some of his street cred as he does $300 million Marvel movies by occasionally making snotty remarks about them, that he still seems like an edgy outsider artist.
Yeah.
So he's getting the money, but he's also able to stand outside and sort of
break the fourth wall.
Right. But I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the stuff. A lot of the stuff that's coming out these days. The A24 movies might be an exception because there's some real integrity to this one. Yeah, they seem like there's a creative vision behind it that isn't just about how quickly can we get this out and will it have a big opening weekend. I mean, most of their movies don't have big opening weekends in Hollywood terms.
You're only going to see them at the Angelica or Magnolia Theater in your hometown.
Yeah. So, but I don't know. I suppose the industry can only go so far in one direction before it starts to go in the other direction. So maybe now that you do have some success with the A24 movies, maybe things will start to change. Maybe even though I don't plan to see it, Terrifier 2 might be a sign that there's a taste for something different.
People are going to crowdfund more and more movies.
Hopefully.
But they're going to be expecting a Terrifier 2 outcome. When they don't get it, they're going to be like,
a terrifying outcome. I see what you did there.
But the best thing about crowdfunding is that the movie doesn't need to be successful. Right? You've already made your money. Right? People gave you the money to make the movie, and anything you make after that is gravy.
Right.
So that's not a situation that existed when I was making my movies. I wish it had been. That would have been great.
Are there any
we still have investors out there that are waiting for their money 20 years later.
Ooh, well.
I think you paid me, so I think I'm all right.
Oh, that's okay. I'm glad to hear that.
Anything for Craig.
I remember how much I made per day on that movie too.
Well, if there's any amounts outstanding, don't talk to me about it because I never touched a dime of that. I had no idea what was happening with the money. But.
Are there any other people you wanted to kind of collaborate when you first started out? It would have been interesting seeing you guys work with Charles Band.
Oh, yeah. Well, he had a pretty good thing going there for a while.
Right?
Yeah,
he was a family business. Like his father formed it. His brothers scored all the movies. It's like anyone who I know who's worked on them and read about basically just said it was a very casual, laid-back business. Just come into the soundstage. They'd get a few actors who've been on stuff like X-Files or Star Trek and just starring in a totally different kind of campy,
Well, the only thing I would say about the Charles Band films, even though I admire what they accomplished, it's sort of similar to the way I feel about Trauma films. I admire the longevity of the company, but I can't really think of too many movies that they did that I really particularly liked. And I think part of the problem with the Charles Band films, and what were the names of his companies? He had like Empire, was that one of the
Empire, Full Moon, and then
Full Moon, right? And I guess that was when home video came along, and it proved to be so profitable for everybody that you could take even like Don Dola movies and make a fortune, putting them on a VHS.
Never been released before.
We'll return after these messages.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gavsey, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like RoboCop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
We let things pile up in the DVR, we add them to our queues, we wait for the DVDs and Blu-rays. We time shift. The Time Shifters Podcast. Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, superheroes, comedy, action, film, television, maybe some not-so-current events. Find us on iTunes or at timeshifterspodcast.com.
Cool thing about Blind Knowledge is we are in multiple countries. We are worldwide all across the globe. We are in the US, we are in the UK, we are in Canada, Germany, India, Japan. We're in Australia, y'all. BlindKnowledge.com. Now back to the feature presentation.
Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, Naruto, all things that we love, all manga that were originally published in the legendary magazine Weekly Shonen Jump.
But not every series can run for 300 chapters and have a hit anime. This is David.
This is Jordan.
We're the hosts of Shonen Flop. Each episode we look at manga that ran in Jump that didn't quite make it.
We discuss what it did wrong, what it did right, how the series could have turned itself around, and ultimately, was it a flop or not?
Run all your favorite podcast apps, and you can find us at shonenflop.com.
Keep on flopping, floppers.
Right. And they moved away from shooting these low budget horror movies in real places, in real locations. And they started doing the sort of soundstage thing where they'd say, well, let's find a factory that we can buy or rent, and we'll do all of our stuff in there, and the sets look like sets. And for me, that makes those movies a little less interesting, I like films that have a feel of the place. It seems to me that's an important part, particularly for horror movies. So like a film like Shockwaves, which is similar to one of the films that influenced me.
Yeah.
Right. That was actually shot in a real place. It was like a derelict hotel someplace on an island somewhere. And it was an amazing location. You couldn't build something like that. And the movie works because they found that place. Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, one of Bob Clark's early films.
There you go.
They actually shot it in real places, right? There's no sound stages.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes a big difference. Some of those films, really both of those films probably would be worthless if they'd been shot on sound stages. It was really... do you agree? Or,
I concur.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it just gives it, because the place becomes part of the character. It becomes a character in it. Yeah. When it's all set up like a stage show, you put your actor here's stage left, stage right, and they're standing right there doing their dialogue, as opposed to having to move around a real physical environment. And you, as the camera, have to move around that physical environment. So you're actually in a place. So you put yourself, your actors, your everyone's in that place. As opposed to saying, we'll digitally just redo it or something like this. I mean, I can see a soundstage being important because locations are difficult to get to, or they're a pain in the ass to get to. And I can understand replicating a certain location because it's easy enough to shoot in a location. And believe me, I love going sometimes on a soundstage as opposed to going to locations. Because I drive everywhere and it sucks to park from stuff like this. So sometimes, but generally speaking, I like when But I've seen some amazing set design. I've seen some. I did, when I did Boardwalk Empire, they replicated the boardwalk in real play, but it was a set, but it was a physical environment, and it had everything from the boardwalk to part of the beach. But you went into the set. You went into the set. You went into the stores. You went into the hotel lobby. You went all the way up to the elevator. So you were in a physical environment that was created, but it was a physical environment, and you didn't have to, deal with what might be wrong with the area that you're in. Because, I did movies where we shot in Staten Island on one of those old abandoned psychiatric hospitals, and we were well warned: you stay here. You don't go there, because we may not be able to find you again, because it was condemned and it was stuff. So I could see, but we shot there. We shot where it was safe. But I can understand when you say when you're physically, because as a director and as a writer, you're now in the place. This is how you see it. This is how you wrote it. This is how you perceive it. So I think it also helps everyone involved to actually physically be in the place, because now the place influences your thoughts and your minds and how it is.
Everything from the lighting to the background sound, everything is going to become a part of the movie now. The place itself is going to become part of the movie. When you look back at some of the films that we like from the 60s and 70s, one of the reasons why we like them is because they show us real places that may not exist in that form anymore. So they become like time capsules.
That's very true.
It's very eye-opening.
But I can understand that. I can understand the desire not to have to travel, because when I think about some of the most difficult experiences that we had on Sleepless Nights and on Demon Resurrection, it was all a damn traveling time, going all the way out to some distant place on Long Island,
New Jersey was a killer.
New Jersey, yes. I mean,
what's it like working on the Power franchise so far for you, Craig?
It's been great. I've been doing it for like 9 years.
Right? Is it a actual nightclub that they have there, or did they?
Well, the nightclub, the exterior was the place in the meatpacking district. That was the exterior. The interior was shot in the Steiner Stages in Brooklyn. It was actually a 2-level stage. That is no longer there anymore, because
there you go, capsule. And I want to know where that nightclub is.
Now it's the school. Now it's the if you follow the Power universe, now I work on a show called Ghost, and sometimes Raising Kanan, and now it's the Stanford University. So you have like the lecture hall, you have the hallways, you have teachers teachers' offices, you have the dorm rooms, and that's all in the same stage.
And Hopkins will love it. It's very edgy. It's got a lot of stuff that you would otherwise probably only see in an exploitation movie, and you're like, but here it is in a.
It's kind of like almost like that. I mean, it's got all that stuff.
It would have been a blaxploitation movie years ago.
Right. I mean,
so many people love it, and it hasn't gotten any Emmy wins. And it's kind of like Yellowstone and Ray Donovan. It's like it's talking so many truths about society. It's like people must be not willing to want to, acknowledge it. They're like, oh, it's hitting too close to home.
Well, I think also because it's not like a Star Wars. You know what I mean? Like everyone knows the Star Wars. I mean, everyone can pick out R2-D2 anywhere in the world, but people may not be able to pick out some of the characters, because it's on a streaming service that you have to pay for. If it was on a general streaming service, it might be a little bit more able to see. The subject matter may not be for everyone's cup of tea as well. I'll be honest with you, I don't have stars, so I've never really seen it, but I live it 6 months out of the year, so I could tell people about it. But it's people's like it. They like it. They like it. They don't like it. They don't watch it. And some people know about it. It depends on who is the fan base. I mean, there's a lot of fan bases out there that do watch it and say things about it. I mean, it's all depends on what your cup of tea is.
Totally.
I mean, I've done a lot of things. I've done throat cuttings and stabbings, and I've done pretty makeups. I've done pretty ugly makeups. It does allow me to kind of play around with some ideas. We have the new season coming out. I'm not sure when it comes out, but it's got a lot of stuff in it.
I gotta catch up.
A lot of stuff going on in it, and we say hello to new people. We say goodbye to some people.
Bye bye. 2 gunshots that I'm gonna add to your face. Yeah.
You know, but but like I said, I've been doing it for close to, I was on for what, 5 seasons of Power and 3 seasons of Ghost now. And I think in January we start season 4.
Bingo.
So yeah, you know, keeps a roof over my head, my food in my kid's stomach. So
There you go.
Hey,
you know,
it's good stuff. Just so you know.
thank you. Thanks so much.
Have you guys thought of maybe traveling to some panels just as a side hustle?
Like
I've done some panels at conventions. I've done
really?
some. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw one that was RosterCon, but I wasn't sure if that was you or not. No, okay. Different Craig Lindberg had a RosterCon.
Oh wait, what was it called? What was it?
I think it was Roster or something like that.
RosterCon?
I don't. Internet's a weird thing.
I mean, I've done Connecticut. I did. I forgot what it was. It was a convention in Pennsylvania. I did this year.
Oh, really?
I've done Eternal Con, some local conventions. I think. But what's funny is I go out and I seek out the conventions. I say, hey, you know,
if Rob Bowden or Stan Winston could have come here back in the day, so can I? You know?
Yeah, why not? I mean, Connecticut that's been always a good one. I usually get a pretty decent audience for that one. Yeah, I get like 30 people sometimes. And
what movies do you put on your spreadsheet?
Well, basically the premise that I do is how the written page, you know, how a script is written and how the makeup artist interprets what the director or the writer describes in their character. So I will present on the screen, okay, here's a blurb from, let's say, for example, I've been using, I did part of season 10 and part of season 11 of American Horror Story, right? So there's one piece of dialogue that was a descriptive piece of, it says, they see these guys that are bald and there's vampire-ish and they got pale skin and stuff like this. That's basically the description. So then you go and, you know, I mean, I wasn't doing it. I was doing the makeup. So someone else had to interpret that. Like, how does the makeup artist interpret what the director wants, what the writer sees? So that's the premise of my panel. Is I say, how do I, as the makeup artist, go through the process of bringing 2-dimensional characters to life? You know,
so much like Willie goes with it with his movies, you go with it and just kind of revealing your process too. And
well, you know, when do you remember how I met you, William? Was it through the Backstage newspaper, one of those?
Backstage was pretty big back then.
Well, we ran ads for actors in Backstage. I don't know if Howard Nash, the producer, ever ran any ads.
Yeah, Craig, you acted.
He might have been somebody you knew from some other project. Is that possible?
Because Craig, you acted in Rock and Roll Frankenstein.
I did a little bit.
Like, did anyone from that movie carry over to this one?
No, I don't think any. You know what I tended to do when I first started doing the makeup is I would go to the Backstage. I'd look through the Backstage newspaper. I looked through the New York Production Guide, those kind of things. And if there was a project that sounded interesting, like if, let's say it was a horror movie, and I would just submit a resume. And a lot of times they would say, "Oh, we weren't even looking for a makeup artist, but hey, we'll come chat with you."
Well, that sort of sounds like the way we operated. We just sort of were like a cow in the field. We just let everything affect
let it
us.
Go.
So it's possible that maybe you responded.
Might have been because I got a few jobs for a few other, in the beginning I got a lot of jobs that way where people weren't looking for a makeup artist or this or that, but the project sounded, well, why not? I got to start somewhere.
Oh, we definitely needed a makeup artist, so I'm surprised that we weren't looking for somebody, because I wasn't really in charge of that, because I wasn't even the director at that stage.
Right.
Originally, I was supposed to be the writer.
Oh, really?
And the producer was, he had hired a student who had his own camera, which made a big difference. And he was going to be the DP and the director. And then the producer actually had a chat with him, and he realized that he was a Japanese fellow. He could barely be understood. And he couldn't figure out how a guy who can't speak English was going to direct a movie that's like 99% dialogue. So he asked me to do it. And that's how I ended up doing it. So by the time Greg was hired, you may have already been hired by the time I actually became the director of the film.
I'm glad you guys get to work with each other regardless.
Yeah.
William, have you been doing any panels and other?
No, I do a podcast with a fellow by the name of Carrie Vickers.
Sweet.
And we have it must be like 40 hours of stuff torturing the YouTube audience out there talking about old movies. Me, I've been told that from somebody who was trying to compliment me that my voice could be used as an ASMR recording. So I don't know if that's the effect I was going for, but I guess that's not the worst thing to hear. Apparently, I have a voice that puts people to sleep, which could be useful in some situations.
Well, what's the name of it again? It's
ASMR is the. Have you ever heard of ASMR?
ASMR podcast.
ASMR is a type of video that became popular on YouTube, where people make soothing sounds. It stands for audio syncretic something.
Audio synthetic. Okay, wow.
It basically is like they'll have pretty girls who brush their hair, and the sound of the hair is supposed to soothe people. It's all part
kind
of
of like
wellness.
A sound machine. Gotcha.
Yes, it's like a wellness thing. We're all supposed to. Our stress levels will drop, but that's the funny thing. I never had anybody tell me that their stress levels drop when they hear me talking. So I think this guy was just bullshitting me. There you go.
Sorry,
see, it's working.
Oh my God, I'm sorry.
That's my secret skill, putting people to sleep. But no, I don't have any, I never had any call to go on any panels. I think the problem with both of the films is that they're really not really widely known. So, and that's for a variety of reasons, but nobody's ever reached out and said, hey, would you like to sit on a panel? Or, I mean, you asking me to do this podcast is an unusual thing. I very rarely have anybody reach out to me at all. In the past couple of years, since the Demon Resurrection has been on Amazon, there have been more people reaching out to say that they like the film, which is a pleasing thing to have people say they like your work.
You've been on a podcast from Beneath and a few other guest spots.
Well, that's actually the podcast that I'm talking about. Okay. Me and Carrie do that regularly now. I did it first. About 2 years ago, I went on a show to talk about Demon Resurrection, and I guess he got some pretty substantial audiences for that. So he figured, what the hell? He's a boring guy, but people apparently like him. So we've been doing that ever since. But we don't focus just on Demon Resurrection. That would be a boring podcast to talk about Demon Resurrection all the time. But we talk about other films and classic horror movies and so forth. But I'd never done conventions, never done panels or anything like that. Maybe that's the reason why the movie is so obscure. Maybe I should have done more of that.
It's really not too hard. It's just you got to buy an hour and a panel. Decide how big you want the space to be. Bring posters. I have a few different martial arts and stunt pals, and literally they could just add the first free credits on their movie and get at least some decent audience.
Yeah, well, maybe for the next film, I'll consider that.
Okay. Any upcoming projects you want to promote?
Well, right now, my main interest is just trying to get as many people as possible to see the two films that are now finally available. Because my feeling is, if I have any hope of making future films, it's only because people actually come to recognize that that I exist and I become something of a brand. I think that was probably a mistake I made. I had a tendency to sort of hide from the spotlight, and it's probably not a good idea. You got to really be out front, and you got to sort of establish a brand, because nowadays people aren't just looking for one good movie or one movie that they find entertaining. They're looking for a source of things that's going to be ongoing, right? They want to be able to find somebody who is going to be producing stuff all the time that they like. So what I'm hoping to do is to try to get the word out about Sleepless Nights, get the word out about Demon Resurrection. And even if people don't like the movies, at least they'll be aware of that I exist, that that there's somebody out there doing these type of movies. I have a feeling that probably we're never going to enjoy enormous success with these types of things, because they are sort of they harken back to an old style of storytelling and an old style of horror filmmaking. So I don't know how popular they will be with, with modern audiences.
The cult movie audiences are hard to discern. So, keep testing the waters. I'll tell you, brother.
Yeah. But that's the strategy, is to try to get some name recognition and then maybe do a crowdfunding campaign, raise some money, and if I don't die beforehand, try to make another movie.
Let's get 3 more movies in you. I know you can do it.
Well, I'm gonna try.
If you need help, let me know.
Yeah,
I will definitely be in touch.
Craig's busy,
absolutely.
but he'll make time.
Well, I guess by the time we were doing Demon Resurrection, Craig had already gone on to Fame and Fortune, so he wasn't available for.
You never even asked me. You never reached out.
Yes, we had. Oh, yes, we did. We had some. We did. We had some back and forth. I still have the emails, Craig.
Wait. I don't remember any of this.
Yes, matter of fact, you said that you had other jobs and you weren't going to be able to do it, and you actually recommended a few people.
Did I really?
Yeah. I don't know if you recommended the person we ended up with.
Who was the person?
Ashley Benatar. She was like 19. It was her first film. Maybe. She was fantastic. I mean, it was one of the best people we hired.
Okay.
But so if that was you.
Oh, wait, it was a student. Like she was a student, right?
Well, she was 19, so I guess in a sense, we're all students when we're 19.
Oh my God. I'm sorry, I don't remember, but I don't even remember what I did yesterday. So.
Well, you've had a lot of stuff that happened. See, I only have these 2 movies to keep track of. You've had a lot of other stuff in the intervening years, right? So you probably have a lot of stories to tell. But yeah.
A lot of stories. Some of them are bad. No, I mean, I'm sorry if I don't remember. So I apologize for that.
But
one of these days, you guys are going to do a photo book of.
Oh yeah, we will. I mean, I did a low budget horror film maybe a few years ago. And do you guys know? I'm going to name drop a guy named Greg Lamberson.
It's not ringing a bell.
Greg Lamberson did Slime City Massacre. He did New York Vampire.
Oh, from 2010.
He has another movie called Guns of Eden coming out. I did a movie called for him it was called Johnny Gruesome. He actually brought me up to Buffalo, shuffled up to Buffalo, as they say, and so there I will. It depends on the schedule. Obviously, it does because and that's probably why I couldn't do Demon Resurrection. And I apologize for not remembering it. It's like because when I'm involved in a project, sometimes it's very, very difficult to get out of a project and to hand it off to someone else who whatever, because the actors, it's mostly to do with actors. The actors know you. You've been around them for so many years. They get familiar with you. And when you suddenly depart, they're kind of like, well, who are you? I don't know. So sometimes it's a little bit of loyalty. A lot of it has to do with loyalty to that.
We talked about earlier. You guys are loyal. You make it work.
So that's a lot to do with it, the loyalty. It's like I said, it's been my bread, not my bread and butter, but I've been with that show now for like close to 9 years, so 8 years. So it's been around in my life for a very long time. Just like SNL's been around in my life for many years.
Yes.
It's been in my life for very, very
watching long. It now. You're part of the big empire.
Well, here's a question, Craig. Have you ever encountered any of the Sleepless Nights actors in the field because a few of them have gone on to other things?
No, none, nobody, to be honest with you.
I would have been interested.
No, at least some people who would come up and admit it. I don't know, but I don't know. But
I would have been interested to hear what the conversation would be like if you encountered these people.
No.
You did that crazy
when you told me what these people done, I'm like, I've never, sorry.
No, that's all right.
Don't worry. Okay. William will do another DVD Blu-ray remaster, and then they'll start saying, "Hey, why wasn't I invited?" Like,
and because you shot that in the summer, right? William, you shot that in the summer. One summer, didn't you?
It was in September of 2004 that we started shooting it.
Oh, okay. Might have been the very, very beginning of doing those series. And they usually happen during the fall. That those series always shot from the fall until middle of spring. So
I think originally you said that you were hoping to be involved in some way, but you weren't going to be able to be there on a daily basis.
Right.
But the funny thing about Demon Resurrection, we had some difficulty finding somebody. Ashley actually only came onto the project like, I think it was 2 or 3 days before we started shooting. And I think one of the reasons why other makeup artists weren't interested is because I wanted to do the best part of the fun part. I wanted to do the zombies and the monster baby. And we really only needed a makeup person.
Effect.
Thank you. I thought they came out pretty well. I think the makeup artists really wanted to do that, and they did. The beauty makeup wasn't as interesting for them. But that's what we needed. I mean, I would never dream of putting my hands on any of the actors to apply makeup, but making masks and things like that, that was like a childhood dream. So I think we turned off some of the. We had actually a makeup guy that came to our little basement creature factory. And he just took a look around at all the masks that we were making. And he said, yeah, I'll take the job. And an hour later, he called and said, I can't do it. So I have a feeling that he saw, well, they've already done the fun part. I don't want to be doing hair and makeup,
Well, if they're an effects person, then, there's that, I guess, the sense of when people want to get involved in it, they want their stamp on it. It's like, that's my work. I've done that. I did this. And some people just like, as long as you sign a check, I'm okay. I don't care what I do and what I don't do.
Well, I would never dream of doing that again, because the idea of trying to create a fleet of zombies as you're preparing to shoot the movie and you're going to direct it and you're going to photograph it, to also be working on the costuming. That was a crazy idea. So that's not something I'd be doing again. But in that instance, it seemed like the thing to do. And
you liked it, right?
I got a big kick out of that.
Yeah, fine. I mean, people gotta, I think some people sometimes gotta, I think some people just gotta check their ego at the door sometimes and say like, well, if I'm going to get involved in it, this is my part in the participation of it. This is what I'm being asked to do. And yeah, I mean, if they say, well, I want to do everything, and you say, well, I want to do this, you're like, then I guess it's up to them to determine what they want to do and what they don't want to do. And and especially when they're newbies, I hate to say it, sometimes when they're new people, they kind of will go in and just sort of say, I mean, I've had people quit on me the day up. I mean, I remember doing a job at 5 o'clock in the morning. I get a phone call. Oh, I'm not going to come in. I'm not going to help you out. I'm like, I'm going upstate right now to do a bunch of cavemen all by myself. And needless to say, you're off my list. I'll never call you again. Yeah. I won't say that to them, but I'm like, okay, because I'm not going to spend the time yelling at them for abandoning me. But I'll just go like, well, you're off my list, and you never know where that list goes. I mean, and then for someone to say, well, I don't want to do your movie because you've done all the zombies already, and you just asked me to make everyone look pretty. But that's the job.
I've actually had a similar experience to what you're describing, where people bail at the last moment on a couple of occasions.
Awful.
And it's angry. It makes you angry at the time. But when I think about it in retrospect, I think to myself, oh, thank God. Because sometimes people will get involved in a production out of some perverse notion that they have to do it. A job has been offered to them. They don't have anything else going on right now. And they're not interested in doing the work. They don't like the project. They don't like you. And to have people go ahead and actually become a part of the production when they have that attitude is worse. It's better for them to say right at the start, I don't want to do this. All right, goodbye. And we can get on to somebody who's a little more enthusiastic, a little more engaged in the thing.
Right.
Because, I mean, at least with the projects you've been working on over the past 20 years, people make real money, and there's real consequences to their career if they pull shit like that.
Right. Well, I mean, it's not. Yeah, I mean, there's been actors that have been on some shows, especially the ones we were talking about, where they didn't work out, and they recast them mid-season or something like this. And suddenly, like, but that wasn't the same. Oh, okay,
I'll try to make
playing
your
the
job
same character. So even in that respect, I think, when we talk about checking egos at the door, I think, as you said, William, I think people come in expecting something to happen. And when it doesn't quite happen, when people ask me this question I always tell people patience. just do your time.
Do your time.
Do your time, because when that opportunity comes in, like people say, well, you must be lucky. And I'm like, no, luck really doesn't have anything to do with it. I've done all that I've done to bring me to this point. And, you know, a buddy of mine once said, and about him getting a job. And I, you know, because I, when he first started, I would help him out. And, you know, I said, well, I may get your foot in the door, but you keep yourself in the room. And that really comes from personalities, a work ethic. And that's what I think a lot of students don't really, I mean, not students, but some people who are brand new kind of get it, is they have to do their time. They're not suddenly going to work on a Spielberg movie simply because they walk out the door. Maybe they will. Hey, that's, you know, God bless them if that so happens, and stuff like this. But if you don't do the good job, that Spielberg film will be the one and the only one that you'll ever do, because you haven't kept yourself in the room. And I think when, going back to, you know, William, when you were talking about putting the time in, and I'll be honest, you know, when you put the time in for all the stuff that you've done, it will come to fruition here or there. It will happen. It's just that, you know, people will get noticed. People will notice it. People will see it. People will acknowledge it. It's just a matter of time. I mean, so Fat Guy Goes Nutsoid, and I'm talking about it like 30, 40 years later.
That's right.
Your dedication paid off.
You know, it's, I always tell people, just stay the course. And, you know, you talk about my 20-year career and how I've gone on. It's only because I've known a lot of people when I first started doing makeup that don't do it anymore. And I've never heard their name whatsoever. But every person who I know who have stayed the course, they're working. Actually, one person I know, he's a department head at SNL, been there for 20, 29 years. And all the people that I know, they're all working because they all stayed the course. None of them kind of went, oh, you know,
I'm too fancy
and I
for
always
this.
tell people, like,
yeah.
What's that? Sorry?
They don't do the whole I'm too fancy for this. They're like, no.
There is something about low budget, especially horror films. They have a life, a long tail, and this might be to the chagrin of some of the actors who appear in it, as we were discussing. Some of them may want to forget about it, but it is true that with these types of films, very often they're going to outlive us. You know,
I mean, here we are, you and I, talking about a movie we did in early 2000s.
Over 20 years ago. Right?
Yeah. So here we are, you know, and people, and you were talking about the Universal monster films, you know, the Universal films, people are still talking about those. They're still out there. They're still there, you know. So to me, horror and sci-fi, I feel, has a lot more longevity than a lot of other movies, unless they're really
prestigious films,
you know, prestigious films and stuff like this. But you know, no one's really going to go to a convention. You know, I mean, I don't know a Breakfast at Tiffany's convention, if you know what I mean. You know what I mean? Not saying it's bad, but I will not detract from that movie. But there's not really, they don't really have a convention for something like this. They don't have a, maybe they might have a Sound of Music convention where they have everyone dressing up like, you know. But there's a ton of, you know, you were talking about this recently about horror conventions and sci-fi conventions and Star Trek conventions and Star Wars conventions and all these conventions that are out there. And when you go to, like, me, you know, Chiller or, you know, San Diego Comic-Con, you know, they're packed with people.
Yeah.
And they're dressed up, you know, the cosplay is anime, you know, it's because it's that little niche that exists and stays, will always be there.
Well, yeah, you know, maybe that's part of it, is the fact that horror movies and fantasy films allow you to actually participate. People feel like they can almost adopt this as a lifestyle, and some people really have, maybe to an unhealthy degree.
They've thought about it longer. Yeah,
right. They become part of the horror community or the science fiction community, and it's a part of their lives in a way. They might like Breakfast at Tiffany's as well, but
yeah,
not going to become a part of their life in the same way that the horror movies do.
Right. You know,
I don't know why horror movies feel like they're almost inviting you to participate. They almost feel like
they're very primordial.
Yeah, that could be.
That's what I look at them. I think, you know, the fight or flight, you know, been since we were, you know, primordial, you know, cavemen type of thing. Yeah. Run away or fight the saber-toothed tiger. What's our choice?
Right.
You know,
the thrill of the kill.
Right. I think it's just a very, a very primordial feeling to be scared and to be frightened. And it's something that's safe to be frightened because there's so much stuff to be afraid of in the world, and I think that the fact that, when people can see, a movie where they could, when we talk about the joke, Freddy Krueger was a child molester, and suddenly he's on T-shirts and toys and things like this because he became an anti-hero. Jason Voorhees, Mike Myers, they're all
of them,
anti-heroes.
Yeah.
And people they don't go to see the movie because they want to see the people talking. They want to see, can we cut their throats already? Shut up talking. We don't, So I think it's a very primordial thing, and they keep making Halloween movies. They keep making, they keep redoing them, putting their new spin on it.
And it's the Fast and Furious effect now, where even if you're like, I fucking hate that movie, you're still going to go see it.
Still go to see it.
People have now invented, like Will was even talking about earlier with So Bad They're Good movies. People still have is like, I guess tonight's going to be a trash night or a night where I need 5 more beers. It's
a funny thing because I know myself for almost all for the past many decades that movies have been available online or through home media. If I get like a new Dondola movie or something like that, not that there are any new ones, but new to me,
a new remaster,
right away that goes right to the top of my list of things to watch. And the movies are terrible, but there's something about them that I find hypnotizing. Their awfulness is hypnotizing.
People are always finding new movies by Jess Franco.
Yeah, he was very prolific. Yeah,
right.
He turned out a lot of
Orson Welles, and then I show movies with vampires and lesbians making out, and it's just like that's his shtick, and he's got different versions of all his trashy movies, so then it makes it even more wild how he didn't plan on making collector's item of his filmography, but that's just how it worked out.
One of the funny things about Franco is that he actually had some interaction with Orson Welles.
Yeah,
I don't know if he said. Are you familiar with this?
The Don Quixote movie.
Right. He actually
still vary on what is the better version, Wells or his.
Well, apparently, the Wells estate they weren't too crazy about his cut.
No.
But that's
it's just that he has a extra narration. People find it cheesy, but to me, it's the equivalent of a Japanese dub of a movie. It's like whatever version of it you want. What's accessible to you. You go for it.
Well, I think it's just remarkable that he was apparently involved in the production of that. So that's how he ended up
assistant director.
So that's kind of wild too, when you stop and think about these sorts of connections. The guy who was Orson Welles' assistant for the last decade of his life, who shot all his stuff, I forget his name.
Gary Graver.
Yes. He was the guy that was the photographer for what, Dracula versus Frankenstein and some other Al Adamson movies.
Allied cinema, various hardcore porn. He was big in that area as well because he brought Betamax into that. So
you're an expert on these things, apparently.
They've only done so many documentaries on him. But
I actually bought that guy's book. He wrote a book.
Yes.
And I thought it was terrible the way Orson Welles treated him. And the fact that he was still loyal to Welles right up
basically
to the end.
Got a heart attack out of it, but he just kept coming back.
It was similar to the story of that guy who just passed away recently, who was the assistant to Stanley Kubrick for years. I don't know if they made a dodocumentary film about him, and it's a very interesting story. But the same sort of thing, and not that Kubrick treated him badly, but he was just like a dog's body. And he was actually the guy that apparently chose the two girls for The Shining, the 2 little kids that.
Oh, wow.
So you find out about these people that are operating on a fairly low level and also doing like cheesy horror movies on the side, and they're working with some of the giants of cinema. So that's kind of encouraging. It means there's hope for all of us.
Well, paycheck's a paycheck.
That's true. Yes.
I mean, think about all the old actors that couldn't find work after a certain amount of time, and they had to do these exploitation films, and because it was the only people who were willing to pay them and bring them on, and and then when you go on it, you're like the big deal on that movie.
Right.
You know, even though in Hollywood you're like, but in that world you're up here. So
that's right.
Grade one,
like
prestige for different prestige.
Like what's his name? The guy that the Red Letter Media was always making fun of. Cameron Mitchell.
Cameron Mitchell. Yeah. I always think of Ray Milland.
Oh, Ray Milland, yes. Well, he managed to preserve his dignity to some extent because he was even doing like Columbo episodes towards the.
Yeah, but if you'd be strapped to the back of Rosie Greer, I think. You know.
Oh,
I take it you've heard of Emmett Furla?
What's that?
I take it you've heard of Emmett Furla?
I don't think so.
One of the co-producers on Power, but so basically they've come out with all these movies, and they're basically much like the Joe Don Baker, Cameron Mitchell, Dirk Benedict effect. That's what Bruce Willis was in, where they would just hire.
Oh, yes. The what do they call them? Geezer teasers.
But they it's just wild how anyone can be a producer nowadays. Like they just play around with Wall Street money, and then they thought, oh, they must be legit. They're one of 20 people credited on Lone Survivor or, you know, The Irishman. And then next thing you know, the Morgan Freeman, De Niro, and Mel Gibson are all in these movies, but for just 1 to 2 days, $2 million later.
I guess it's always been true that if you actually can come up with the money to pay these people, they're willing to work for you. Very few people.
Even the agent might say, hey, it might be a crapshoot. It might not be legit, but I want to be your agent and I want my money too. So do it. Go to Louisiana for 2 weeks.
But for me, and I saw there was a Tubi, I suppose a Tubi original that was similar to that. It had like 5 or 6 horror actors, Tony Todd and Adrienne Barbeau, and a bunch of other folks that are famous from horror movies from years past. And when I watch those things, I feel a certain level of depression, though, because you know, it just seems like a transaction. It's like witnessing some sort of bank transaction. There's no real inspiration on the screen. It's just people picking up a check, you know. And I suppose in a way I can admire the cleverness of being able to put together a deal like that. But the films themselves aren't very clever. They're not really very inspiring or moving in any way. I mean, I thought that the age of being able to sort of buttress a low-budget movie by sticking one name actor in for 10 minutes, I thought that era has passed, but apparently not. Apparently, it's all the rage now.
Oldest trick in the book. Even if people think it looks fake, they will still pay top dollar for it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, sometimes you have to have someone that's of notoriety that people will put in. Like, oh, I know that guy, and and sometimes it just gives that film some what is it called?
Identity.
Not an identity, but like gives it some kind of prestige or
credibility.
Some kind of like it's more than what it is.
It's not just a movie; it's a Schwarzenegger movie. It's a Bruce Campbell movie.
People look at it and they say, well, if that guy's in it, it must be a real movie. Right?
It's a William Shatner movie.
Right. You know,
even if they know it's bad in it, they're the best part of said movie.
Of course, William Shatner, and he did a couple of pretty
Kingdom of the Spiders,
and
Devil's Rain.
He was always the best thing in those. Yes. Devil's Rain, yes.
That was a fun movie, though. Ernest Borgnine plays a freaking devil. You know?
Did you ever hear how it's rumored that's where John Travolta first became a Scientologist?
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Really?
It's the rumor because it deals with cults.
Right. Interesting.
I once asked Jackie Ray Newman, who you might know as the little girl Debbie in the infamous Models of the Hands of Fate, if she might have perhaps met people from that, because they're both very similar movies. And she's like, maybe. There's no telling. I was working with actual Satanists being extras in the background.
Well, Manos is another example, right? I mean, that's a film.
No one expected it. And her father, nicest guy ever. When he saw it on Mystery Science Theater, he's like, hey, I'm a different kind of famous. And he chuckled himself sideways. It didn't change his opinion of the show.
Did they make a sequel? They came out with a sequel to
2 sequels. One was deliberately trashy. One was being trying to be better. It's a special kind of fandom.
Well, I always thought that guy had the wrong attitude, though. I mean, he seemed to be. The famous story is that he had sort of like
fertilizer.
a bet he was a fertilizer salesman who somehow came into contact with Sterling Silverfant, who was the Hollywood screenwriter. and he sort of made a bet that he could make a movie. His attitude was, "Oh, we don't need all this, all this fuss that the studios go through. But you can make a movie." And of course, the result was Manos. So that sort of disrespect for the professionalism of the Hollywood people is what led us to this extraordinarily terrible movie. And I guess what's remarkable about it is it's so creative in its awfulness. It's not awful in a boring way. It's just sort of spectacular and exciting in its awfulness.
You did the best with your restrictions.
He had a lot of restrictions. There's no question about that.
I think if you take yourself serious is what makes it funny. Yes. I mean, would Airplane be as funny if those actors weren't being
winking
serious
at the camera, say get it?
If they were like, "Hey,"
yeah,
that also may be the reason why a lot of the low budget shot on video movies that are just as awful are not as funny. It's because you need that feeling of gravitas. This is a movie, right? And then you see all the silly shit that's going on in it, and it's sort of like laughing in church. Everything seems so off and inappropriate. Whereas in a shot on video thing, it doesn't have that sort of gravitas. Right?
It's becoming an unusual predicament because it's like that's all they're known for, so they're going to just keep making them, even though, I mean, like, what was it? Tim Thomerson, when he kept being asked to play Dollman in Jack Death and Trancers, he was a comedian, so he basically was always like, "Hey, they want me to be a super cop or a demon slayer and everything I do." It's like, it doesn't matter if we're on the stupidest sequel we can make at this point. I'm the only one who can be doing this because no one else is going to do this.
And they're still making those sequels, aren't they?
There's talks. I guarantee you, Dollman versus Jack Death would sell out video stores for streaming numbers.
I mean, but there's a built-in audience,
right?
That audience who will go see it or watch
Puppet
it.
Master is going to definitely get to number 30.
I'm surprised they haven't done a series yet.
Yeah. What the hell's up with that? Why is there no?
I mean, they did a Chucky series, right?
They did a Chucky.
Like that.
Yeah, Universal could split the bill with Full Moon. Puppet Master versus Chucky. I've said for years. Even people love versus movies, even when they tend to be bad, like Alien versus Predator or what have you. And it's like, yeah, if you did Leprechaun versus Wishmaster, there would be a bunch of people running the shit out of it.
Did you see that documentary, Best Worst Movie?
I think so, yeah. And just
that was an extraordinary documentary. Yeah. And it showed how sad the story is for a lot of the people that participate in these terrible movies.
Yeah, they don't get any residuals. They hated making those. They don't want to be asked about the movie.
And they really thought they were doing something great. I mean, in that case, they had one guy who was like a dentist now, and he's very successful. And so he can treat it with a sense of humor. Hey, I did the worst movie ever made. Come on and watch it. But in the documentary, they seek out some of the other actors who, really wanted to have careers as actors and never panned out for them. It's not quite as hilarious, It's kind of tragic in a way. And the guy who directed it apparently is still convinced that it was a great movie.
Yeah.
Well, you might as well stick to the script. Best movie ever made, because maybe for them it was the best movie they ever made, and they were very serious about it.
Well, yes, apparently he was. I mean, they have some footage. It was Troll 2.
Troll 2 and the Italian.
And apparently it was a big sensation as a midnight movie, and they have at least some footage of him castigating an audience for making fun of it, which is not a good look. I mean, I would think that if you're successful because your movie is so awful, I mean, I would take that deal. If you're making money because the thing is bad and people like laughing at it, why wouldn't you accept that? Right?
Well, let's think of The Room.
Exactly, yes.
And he actually, Eric Freeman.
I mean, they made a book. They made James Franco played him in the
feature film about the making of it. Right?
Just lose your dignity for 1 second and then use it to make the movie you actually want to make. But yeah.
Yes, exactly right. I mean, that should be the attitude.
From Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 wanted to do a panel with the director of the original movie, who wanted nothing to do with the other guys who did all the sequels. And he's like, well, hey, you can split the bill. We'll all be happy. We'll all get fanfare. And the guy's like, I can't get over my hatred of how, you guys ruined my original movie. And it's just like, it's all the same audience. They love it all. So you might as well just feed the masses. But he has a legit script for a part 2 that would actually be for fans of the original. And so it is interesting seeing these peacemakers, and yet sometimes it's just people can't get past it. It's just they're too close to it.
Are you familiar with Spookies?
Spookies.
That's another one where there's a terrible conflict between the people that originally worked on the film, and it was taken away from them, and other people came on. Sort of, I don't know if they screwed it up or they made it into a masterpiece, but
it's kind of like Demons, Argento's Demons, where just about every other movie was just slapping on the Ghoulies label just to get distribution.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you think distribution is going to change up in the next 10 years, do you think?
Well,
especially now, since anyone can add any kind of subtitle or be intentionally bad or trashy, like there's like on number 9 of Tremors now,
Right. Well, it's probably the best of times for low budget filmmakers, and because we've never had the ability to do what we can do now. I mean, somebody like myself can make a low budget movie, even if it's 20 years old. You can get it up on a platform like Film Hub. It's offered to all the streaming services. And you could become famous if your movie hits a responsive chord. You could become famous with something you made years ago. That hasn't happened to me yet, but there's always the potential. Whereas in the past, you always had these sort of gatekeepers that you had to get past, like the distributors, right? And we made the mistake with Well, we didn't make a mistake. It was the only choice we could make. Back at the time, we went with a distributor who had a deal with Blockbuster. And so we knew that that film was going to end up in all the Blockbuster stores, all the Hollywood video stores.
Some kind of rental numbers, yeah.
Right. And it actually ended up making like $170,000 in its first release. What we didn't realize is that when the distributors put out a movie like that, these small distributors, that's it. That's all the movie's going to make. And nobody else wants to touch it because it's old. And then there's nothing worse than old product. They want something new. Now that's changed. Now you can take old product and put it out again and maybe make a couple of bucks from it.
Festivals are just as bad. You'll see people give screeners the same, and they're saying, hush, hush, don't tell anyone it's in a festival right now. And don't tell them they're in these 5 other festivals because, then they won't give it any kind of accolade or attention because they must be the first one, which is so weird because in the 90s, there were several movies that would be premiered on HBO and Cinemax and then played at a local screening or festival, and that was their pitch as seen on HBO. And so I am wondering why everyone likes to keep doing an about face.
Well,
the way marketing is.
Well, festivals, as far as I'm concerned, it always surprises me that savvy people can't see when they're dealing with businessmen. They seem to have the impression, they're suffering under the impression that people that run festivals are doing it for the art. They want to get these great films out there. It's a business.
It is.
And the same thing is true of conventions. I mean, I'm old enough to remember like the earliest comic book conventions and Star Trek conventions, but to a certain extent, it really did feel like just a gathering of fans. But it very quickly became a business. And now it's a business, right? They want to make a lot of money. And they're going to use your film as product to make money for their convention or their festival. So I never felt very comfortable throwing a lot of money at festivals because they do ask for submission fees very often. I don't really know if there's any value anymore. There was a time when the festival circuit was an important part of the whole process. You had to get attention for a movie like Blair Witch Project, for instance. It needed that attention at the festivals.
You needed the gimmick shot, on the newest, camera.
Right.
No one else is doing that.
Whatever your thing is, it has to be first tested in the festivals to see if it gets any reaction. And then if it does get a reaction, presumably all the distributors have representatives there attending those festivals. They'll see the sort of buzz that the thing is getting and they'll make an offer to buy it. But now you don't need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we already talked about the fundraising or the crowdfunding platforms. You can raise the money for the film and you can be in profits as soon as the film is finished, right? It's almost like what Roger Corman used to do, where he would sell off the rights to different territories based on the poster, before he even made the movie. And it's a similar thing. We don't need
Canon
to make
films would make false promises.
Exactly.
And they'd still make some kind of movie.
Right. For years they were doing that. They overdid it ultimately, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess they were fortunate that they didn't end up in jail. But,
yes.
But nowadays, it's conceivable that if you can create a crowdfunding campaign, you can raise the money for a small film, you can complete the film, you can get it up on the streaming platforms, and whatever you make is yours, because crowdfunding is it's not profit participation. It's not like they're investors. So all you have to do is give them their whatever perks that you've promised them, and you could conceivably have a career making small films in that way.
Turbo
That's
Kid
an attractive
3, Black Dynamite 2.
Yeah. That, to me, that's an attractive thing. I've long since given up any hope that I'm going to be making Hollywood movies. They're not going to be calling me to do the next Avengers movie or anything like that. But I'd love to be able to make small horror movies that will find some audience and that will allow me to stay alive and make more movies.
You still got time. You still got time.
I like to think so. Not dead yet. So
it's been a delight having you sit down here, gentlemen, for 2 hours. And
has it been 2 hours? My God.
Yeah. But see, we weren't looking at the time. We weren't perplexed. We set aside this time, and it was cool to collect all this narrative on the ever-changing business.
Yeah, it was great of you to ask.
Don't have to be first.
Thank you. Thank you.
Don't have to be last.
Thank you. Good to see you, William. I haven't seen you in a while.
Yes, hopefully we'll see more of you in the future.
Well, hopefully.
And congratulations on your success.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Happy for you both.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I hope to see all you guys, again,
Well, we survived the pandemic, so apparently we're unstoppable. We're like the Omega Men.
Right.
There you go. Okay.
So,
right. But remember, he dies at the end. So.
Well, that's true. You make a good point.
And your connection, Craig, is you worked on the loose remake I Am Legend.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
I did. It was a very brief. It was such a weird time. If you have the time for a story, it was originally when we were doing it. It was all shot here in New York. They actually changed Washington Square Park to look like it was abandoned and such. And so a bunch of us were hired, and they hired all these very tall, lanky people, male and female, and everyone had to shave their heads, females too. And so we literally put them all in dance skins, and then the parts of their bodies were piecemeal together. We literally put almost like armor and stuff like this. And once they were in it, that was their costume.
Wow.
And then I had to leave due to personal reasons. And then I came back a month later, only to find out they said, well, we're going to do it all CGI. And that's what CGI really ruined you see, and that's what we were talking about. CGI is when, CGI, I think, dates a film.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you look at the old movies, when they first started doing CGI, when you think of like The Last Starfighter and stuff like this, and you see those the ships, they tend to look very like, they don't look so good,
Even model work, if it's not well lit, you're just like, I see the green screen behind it when that's supposed to make it look better.
Right. When we were talking with someone about American Werewolf in London, like, why has it still considered to be one of the best transformation sequence? I said, because it was all done practical.
Right.
Yes.
It's not CGI.
The Howling. You can still watch.
Yeah.
You don't have to go fight it like you do in sequels.
Yeah. And I think
you have a pretty good example of the contrast. They did John Carpenter's thing, and then they did this more recent thing, I guess also called The Thing,
which
was all CGI, right? And so you can compare the two. Why is there still such affection for the first one and almost no interest in the second one?
Mm-hmm.
I have to think it is because CGI, and as you say, it does date. I mean, even just a few years on.
It makes you wish they could just do kind of what Antoine Fuqua is doing, where he's trying to emulate Walter Hill and Peckinpah. He'll have squibs, and then, he'll just add a bloody, gunshot.
Yeah. So that's where the
easy compromise.
CGI is easy to clean up because there's no blood. I just did a movie where all the wounds are going to be CGI, and I'm like, I've never seen that, where they're literally going to put there was no holes in clothes. They didn't want to destroy any clothes, so they're going to CGI the bullet holes through the wardrobe. And I was like, that's going to be really expensive.
That sounds
That's going to be super expensive. But I'm like, okay. So no blood. All right.
Well, the only good thing about the way they're making movies now is that they can go back over time and fix things, right?
Yep.
So you saw that with Titanic, right, where he put out different versions where he improved the
Coppola took out any camera bloopers or boom mic in the shots that were noticeable for his...
And I assume that that's going to be true of all movies. If we decide in 20 years that we don't want to see everything looking tinted green, we don't want
to see anyone's nose hair.
Yeah,
well, I paid
can go in and they can
Blu-ray.
change it all. They have the original stuff, so they can do whatever they want with it. So I suppose that's the positive side. But
right, and especially for those who are out of ideas, it's like you might as well just improve what you've already perfected.
Well, that's what I'm doing. So let's not knock that.
Right. I'm glad. But no, I think you got 5 more movies in you for real. I think you got it.
Well, I hope so. We'll keep our fingers crossed.
Well, I'm sure our paths will cross again.
I'm sure.
They will.
Stuff like this.
Give or take. But thank you, gents. You
very welcome. Thank you.
This chat.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening. It's a jacked up